90% of the decks I inspected were bolted to the house wrong. Not a little wrong. Wrong in the way that puts a family on the ground with a broken back. You walk out onto your deck with a cup of coffee, and you trust it the same way you trust the floor inside your kitchen. But the floor inside your kitchen is sitting on the ground. Your deck it is hanging off the side of your house by a strip of lumber, and I want to show you exactly what's holding it there. Because it's usually the wrong thing, and it's usually wrong in a way you can see in about 10 minutes. You're standing in a backyard in Ohio on a cool October morning. The grass is wet enough to soak through your shoes. There's a deck about 10 feet off the ground, cedar boards up top, gone silver gray from the weather. It looks fine. It looked fine to the family that bought the house last spring, too. They had a barbecue up there for 20 people over the summer. 20 adults, a full-size grill, a cooler packed with ice, 10 feet up in the air, standing on a board they never once looked behind. I don't walk on a deck first, I go under it. That's where the truth is. Anybody can stand on top of a deck and tell you it feels solid. Solid on top means nothing. So I duck beneath it into that cool dirt shade where the spiders live. And I look up at the one piece of wood that matters more than every other piece combined. It's called the ledger board. It's the horizontal beam bolted flat against the house, and it carries roughly half the entire weight of the deck. The other half sits on the outer posts. Half the deck? Half the people? Half the grill? All pulling on that one board and whatever fastens it to the house. I look up and I already know what I'm going to find because I've found it more times than I can count. The ledger is fastened with nails, just nails. Shiny galvanized common nails, driven at an angle, maybe a dozen of them across the whole span. Some of them have already backed out 1/4 of an inch, their heads sitting proud of the wood, catching the light. And up in the corner, near the door, there's a dark stain running down the siding behind the board. That stain is water. Water that's been getting behind the ledger for years, soaking into the rim of the house, quietly turning the wood I can't see into something with the structural value of a wet sponge. I reach up and push on the board with 2 fingers. It moves. A board holding up half a deck should not move when a 63-year-old man pushes it with 2 fingers. I can smell it too. That sweet, damp, mushroom smell of wood that's given up. Sound wood doesn't smell like anything. This smelled like a forest floor. That's the first reveal, and it's the whole story. Now, let me take it apart, piece by piece. In 35 years and more than 10,000 inspections, I can count on one hand the number of decks that were attached to the house the way the code actually requires. Let me tell you what the wrong one looks like, because you can check yours this afternoon with nothing but a flashlight and a screwdriver. First, the fasteners. The failed deck uses nails. Nails are made to resist wood sliding sideways against wood. They are terrible at resisting pullout, and a ledger board in a hanging deck is being pulled straight away from the house every second of every day. Gravity pulls the deck down, the deck levers against the ledger, and that force tries to peel the board off the wall. Nails back out. You've seen a nail work its way out of a fence board over a few winters. Now imagine that same slow surrender under a hot tub full of water and 4 people. Worse, most of these nails are driven at a slight downward angle, which the guy thinks is helping. It isn't. It's putting the nail in the exact orientation where pull-out is easiest. The right fastener is a structural through bolt or a specific structural screw rated for ledger connections. Not a drywall screw, not a deck screw from the bargain bin, not a lag screw you found in a coffee can in the garage, a 1/2-inch galvanized lag screw seated in a pre-drilled pilot hole, or better, a through bolt with a washer and nut on the inside of the rim joist, or one of the engineered structural screws stamped with a code evaluation number right on the head. These cost real money. A proper structural connector screw runs $3 to $5 a piece, and a real ledger needs a lot of them in a precise, staggered pattern. 2 rows, offset, spaced to the manufacturer's table. A box of common nails costs $5 for the whole box. Now you understand the temptation. This is where the villain walks in. The guy who built this deck was paid by the job, not by the hour. He had a weekend, a nail gun, and 3 other decks to build that same month. Bolts take time. You have to drill a pilot hole. You have to get inside the house to the rim. You have to find the joist. You have to seat a washer and run a nut. The nail gun goes chunk, 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 and he's onto the railing before you've had your second coffee. Nobody inspecting the house at closing crawls underneath. The appraiser sure doesn't. So the shortcut is invisible until the day it isn't. And by then he's long gone and it's your name on the deed. Second, the flashing, or the total absence of it. Flashing is the piece of metal or specialized membrane that goes over the top edge of the ledger and tucks up under the siding, so water sheds down the wall and over the front of the board instead of behind it. On the failed deck, there's nothing. The ledger is jammed straight against the siding, and every rain sends water down into that seam and holds it there. The wood should be dry and tan. This wood was black at the top edge and soft, and when I pressed a screwdriver into it, the tip sank into the handle like the board was made of cork. That's rot, and rot doesn't just weaken the ledger. It travels into the rim joist of the house itself, the band of lumber that ties your floor to your walls. I've pulled ledgers where the rot had climbed a full foot up into the house framing, black and wet, insulation behind it soaked and molded solid. Third, the connection to nothing. This is the one that ends up on the news. Sometimes the ledger is bolted, and bolted well, straight into the house's siding and sheathing, but not into anything structural behind it. It's lagged into 1/2-inch plywood and a layer of foam board. That combination will hold a picture frame and a coat hook. It will not hold a deck. The bolt has to pass through the exterior finish, through the sheathing, and bite hard into the solid rim joist or a properly blocked framing member behind it. 2 inches of thread in solid Douglas fir is a connection. 2 inches of thread in foam and air is a countdown. Miss that solid wood, and you've built a very expensive trapdoor with a barbecue on it. Now, stay with me, because the next part decides whether you spend $300 once or whether your homeowner's insurance company gets a phone call they're going to spend a year fighting. Let me give you the money. The fix, done right on an average deck, is a few $100s in materials. A pack of structural ledger screws, a roll of self-adhering flashing tape, a length of Z-flashing, a couple of tension hold-down connectors. Maybe a couple $100s more if you hire out the labor for a half day. Call it $300 to $600 all in for a retrofit on a deck that's otherwise sound. That's the micro cost. A part that costs less than the grill sitting on top of it. Here's the macro consequence. When a ledger lets go, it almost never lets go slowly. It holds and holds and holds through 100 quiet evenings. And then a group of people steps onto it at once. Everybody drifts to the rail to look at something, and the whole thing peels off the house and drops like a hinged lid. A collapsed deck is not a repair. It's a rebuild, and it's a rebuild after the debris is hauled off and the siding is torn open to see how far the rot went into the house framing. That's $8,000, $12,000, $15,000 in structure alone. And that assumes the only casualty is lumber. The emergency room bill for one person who falls 10 feet onto a concrete patio is larger than the entire deck. I've read the reports. Broken pelvis, fractured spine, skull fractures. A deck collapse at a party can put 6 people in ambulances in one afternoon, and every one of them has a lawyer's phone number by the end of the week. There's a slower bleed, too, the kind you don't see coming. That rot in the rim joist behind the ledger doesn't stay put. It rides the framing into the house. It rots the subfloor at the edge of the room inside. It invites carpenter ants, which love soft, wet wood the way I love a quiet attic. Then the mold sets in behind your interior wall, and now it's an air quality problem on top of a structural one. By the time the floor inside feels spongy near the patio door, you're not fixing a deck anymore. You're opening up a wall, and you're finding out what 15 years of water did to the bones of your house. So why does this happen on 9 out of 10 decks? The mechanism is simple, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. A deck is a lever. The floor of your house is not, because it sits on foundation walls and floor joists that run all the way down to the ground. A deck attached only at the house end is a diving board with lawn chairs on it. Every pound out at the far rail multiplies the pulling force back at the ledger. Put 4 people at the railing to watch the fireworks and you've concentrated the load at the worst possible spot. Nails resist that pull the way masking tape resists a slammed door, and water is the accomplice. Miss the flashing and water rots the connection from behind, so even a deck that started strong gets weaker every rainy season until one day the math tips over and there's no warning because wood doesn't creak politely before it fails. It just goes. Here's the rule, and I want you to write it on the inside of your skull. A deck ledger is bolted through into solid house framing and flashed over the top. Nailed, never. Unflashed, never. Anchored to sheathing alone, never. There's no version of never that has an exception. That's the code, and that's physics. And physics doesn't grant variances no matter how nice the deck looks from the kitchen window. Now let me tell you how it's done right. Walking through it the way I'd walk a young inspector through it, step by step. You start by finding the rim joist inside the house. Down in the basement, or the crawl space, you locate the band of framing at the edge of the floor where the deck attaches on the other side of the wall. That's your anchor. Tap it, look at it, make sure it's solid sawn lumber and not a hollow bump out or a cantilevered overhang. If there's no solid rim there, that changes everything, and I'll come back to that. Then you deal with water before you deal with anything else, because water is what kills these connections. You cut the siding back above where the ledger will sit. You install flashing in layers that shed downward like shingles, always lapping the upper piece over the lower one. There's a piece of self-adhering membrane that goes up the wall behind the siding, a metal cap flashing that folds over the top edge of the ledger and out over its face, and a bead of membrane over the fasteners once they're in. The whole idea is that water always travels down and out, never down and in. You also want the ledger held off the wall slightly, on stainless washers or a strip of spacer, so any water that does get behind it can drain and the wood can dry. A ledger jammed flat and tight against damp siding is a ledger that stays wet. Then the structural fasteners go in. You pre-drill your pilot holes so the lag doesn't split the rim. You run them staggered top and bottom in the exact pattern the connector manufacturer specifies for your deck's span. You don't eyeball the spacing. It's printed on the box and it's in the code table, and it tightens up as the deck sticks out farther, because a longer deck pulls harder. Every washer seats flat. Every bolt gets torqued down until the ledger is drawn tight to solid wood, not spinning free in a stripped hole. Then, and this is the part the nail gun crew skips entirely, you add tension hold downs. These are metal connectors that tie the deck's floor joists directly back to the house framing with a threaded rod, so that even if every fastener in the ledger somehow failed, the deck is still tied to the house. The code has required these on new decks for years now. Almost no older deck has them. They cost around $40 to $60 each, and you typically need at least 2, one near each end. They are the seat belt on the whole system. Here's the good, better, best. Good is a competent retrofit on a deck that's still solid. You confirm the rim is sound, swap the nails for structural ledger screws in the correct staggered pattern, and add proper layered flashing. $300 to $600, a weekend if you're handy, and you've turned a trap into a deck. Better is all of that, plus the tension hold-down connectors tying the joists to the house framing, another $100 to $150 in parts. And now you meet the modern standard, not just the old one. Best and the honest answer for a lot of old decks is a freestanding deck. You add a second beam and a row of posts right along the house, so the deck carries its own weight and doesn't hang on the ledger at all. The ledger becomes a guide, not a load. That runs $1,000 to $2,000 in materials and labor, and it's the only real cure if the rim joist behind the ledger is already gone. That's the honest limitation. If you crawl under there and the rim joist is black and soft, no screw on earth will fix it, because the wood you're screwing into is already gone. Screws need solid fiber to grip. Rotten wood grips nothing. You can torque a lag into a rotten rim all day and it'll feel tight in your hand and hold nothing at all. At that point, the ledger connection isn't the job, the house is the job. And here's the point where you call a licensed pro. If your deck is more than a few feet off the ground, if you find any rot in the house framing, or if the deck attaches to a bump out or a cantilever with no solid rim behind it, that's a structural engineer or a licensed deck contractor, not a Saturday project with a borrowed drill. Height is the difference between a lesson and a funeral, and a bump out connection is engineering, not carpentry. There's no shame in making the phone call. There's plenty of shame in the other outcome. I inspected a house outside Kansas City a few years back. Split level, nice big deck off the kitchen. Second story, easily 12 feet down to a concrete patio. Sellers swore it was solid, said they'd had 30 people up there for a graduation. I went under with my flashlight. 12 galvanized nails across the whole span, no flashing at all, and a rim joist so soft I pushed my whole thumb into it, up to the knuckle. The water stain ran 2 feet down the foundation. I put it in the report in plain language, and I told the buyers to keep every living soul off that deck until it was addressed. The seller was insulted, took it personal. 3 weeks later, during the repair negotiation, a contractor went to pull one board to check the framing, and the ledger came off the house in his hands. In his 2 hands, no tools, no force. The retrofit and rim joist repair ran them about $2,100. The alternative was that same deck, full of the buyer's family, at the housewarming they'd already circled on the calendar. $2,100. Or a phone call from a hospital and a lawyer and an insurance adjuster all in the same week. That's the whole choice, and you get to make it while the deck is still standing, which is the only good time to make it. So this is pay a few $100s today, on a dry afternoon with a drill in your hand, or pay in an emergency room and a lawsuit and a rebuild later. The deck doesn't care which you pick. It just keeps hanging there, doing the math every single day, adding up your dinner guests and the rain and the years. The deck builders are going to come down to the comments and tell me their nailed ledgers have held for 20 years. Let them. I only report what I find, and what I find is under the deck, not on top of it. So go look, take a flashlight, get under your deck, and look at how that ledger board meets the house. Then tell me 2 things. Tell me your state, and how old your deck is. And if you find nails instead of bolts or a dark stain running down the siding behind that board, tell me exactly what it looks like, and what the wood does when you press a screwdriver into it. Because I've read 1,000 of those descriptions, and I can usually tell you how much time you've got. And while you've got that flashlight out, ask yourself one more thing. Those posts holding up the far end of your deck, the ones standing on the ground, are they bolted down to anything at all, or are they just resting there, waiting?